All right here, folks, this is part 2 of What You Thinking. 8th stop, New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, folks, you may think some of this stuff is a little bit out of order, and it could be because it interacts with each of the other stories many times. And the one we're talking about, the Presidential Corps and Beebe and some of these folks, they're going to be kind of mixed in as the boys go in and out, because they're getting in toward when they getting close to graduating from school or in their junior and senior year. And you'll be hearing more about some of that here a little later. 8th stop, New Orleans, Louisiana. The boys hit the Big Easy, took a cab to the Royal Sonesta Hotel, and after checking in and getting spruced up a mite, the boys headed on out to the Commander's Palace for a late supper. Well, Buster said them grillers was pretty good and tipped the waiter an extra 20 bucks for the suggestion on getting them to eat. It was a pretty fancy meal, but worth every penny. Well, after supper, the boys hit Bourbon Street and did the town. One of them clubs, whilst they was having a little snort, a gal come up to Hired and began to tweaking his cheeks. Said he was right cute cause she wanted to visit with him for a spell. Well, Hired, being kind of shy like, lit out to the bathroom and hid for 20 minutes. Oh boy. In the meantime, Walter and Buster was a-talking to some gals that was on a trip too, from Idaho. They was a-talking to the gals when Hired got back, and all of them decided to paint the town red. Well, they all sure enough did, I tell you. Whilst they was a-walking to another club, a feller or a woman, you couldn't tell which, would come a-stumbling down the street. It done fell out right smack dab in front of Jesse and spread-eagled and face down at that. Well, it weren't long till the police come up and had it carted off. Turned out it was a man dressed up like a woman. Walter said, "What's that all about?" Well, all the boys told Jesse to turn off them pheromones. He just howled a-laughing. There was a singer in a club they went to next that was knock-dead gorgeous. She was a Cajun gal and looked to Jesse right off the bat. She see Jesse out in the audience and got a gleam in her eye, I'm telling you. Well, after her set, she walked by their table and winked at Jesse. Well, Buster jumped up and told the woman they enjoyed her singing, and Jesse especially liked the last song. She said it was just for him. Well, old Jesse got red all over blushing, and everybody at the table asked her to sit on down. She said she could for a few minutes, and she was on her break. But I have to get back to singing in a bit. Well, the gal's name was Monique, and was a right nice and friendly gal. Well, Jesse finally opened up and started talking, and his pheromones started cranking up and putting out like popcorn in a machine at the picture show back home. Oh, the boys and gals all said they wanted to tour the bayous tomorrow, and the gal said she was off and her people was going to have a cookout the next day if they'd like to come. C'est bon. Even Jesse voted for that. Well, the next day about 9 a.m., the boys drove up in their rented car they got that morning, and Monique come in her truck. Well, Jesse rode back with Monique. All of them headed out to the swamps following Monique. She led them to a boat ramp on the bayou near Pearlington. 3 airboats was there and took them to a house place a few miles up there in the swamp. Well, that swamp ain't nothing. Boy, I'm telling you, to let go much, because it's you get lost in there, ain't no telling what happened. I'm just saying that. I've been in them swamps. The house was up on a knoll, and the only way to get to it was by boat. Well, when they got there was Zydeco music a-playing and dancing on a makeshift plywood dance floor covered with sawdust. Monique Marie Thibodeau was the gal's full name, and she told the boys and the gals her story of where she come from in these swamps and how her people settled there. Now, she introduced all of them to her ma and pa and brothers and sisters and cousins and friends, and they all welcomed them like family and joined in the festivities. Well, Buster and Jesse both brung a quart of old McBrayer with them and give it to Monique's pa for the party. Well, after all the men folk tried to snort of that old McBrayer, they come to Buster and asked him how to get some of that there liquor. Said it was better than their homemade. Well, Buster told them the story about him and Jesse and how Jesse's family started making straight Kentucky bourbon whiskey. Said he would make sure they got a case of it. Well, one of the boys brung up a big old 98-pound snapper and butchered him up and fried up some turtle and made turtle soup and gumbo with the rest. Pierre, Monique's brother, jumped onto a plywood box ring and sure enough wrestled a gator right there in front of their eyes. Folks was a hooping and a hollering and kids was a playing games and swimming too. But that dang gator wrestling was something else. Buster didn't even know if he wanted to tackle that thing. Food was aplenty with oysters fried on a half shell, shrimp of all kinds, several different kinds of fish and boiled crawdads. You had corn on the cob and tater salad and coleslaw with baked beans and sweet cornbread. You just couldn't name all the food that was there. Stuff Buster never ate before either. Well, after eating was pretty much done and drinks passed around, the music began playing. Now, Jesse done surprised them all. He went over to the boys playing music and asked them if he could borrow a fiddle. They said, "Laissez les bon temps rouler." Now, folks, don't get me to asking, telling you what that's all about. I don't know. I don't speak no French or Cajun. Now, the boys know Jesse had been wanting to learn to play the fiddle, but didn't know that he quite had the hang of it yet. If y'all remember way back in them stories, he said he was going to play that fiddle. Well, they was in for a surprise. Jesse grabbed a hold of that there fiddle and put on a show for the folks, I'm telling you. The boys was about professional like, I'm here to tell you. Now, he was right comfortable in his own skin and just kept on playing till the other boys jumped in. Then it was all Cajun music. Jesse give that fiddle to a feller and grabbed up Monique and went to a dancing up a storm. Jesse was plumb lathered up time he was done playing and a dancing, don't you know. The boys was staring at Jesse with their mouths wide open so's you could drive a bus in them. Monique sat on down and Jesse got the fiddle again and went up to her and began to playing the sweetest love song a body ever heard. All the folks there just stopped and watched Jesse play to Monique, and the gal come plumb unglued and teared up something awful. She jumped up from where she was a-sitting, looked at Jesse for a minute, and lit out like a shuck of light, going to the outhouse, and bawling like a calf that can't find its mama. Well, after a bit, Monique's brother come up to Jesse and the boys and told them not to worry none about Monique, 'cause he figured he had a handle on it. Well, Sir Howard asked him what was the matter. Pierre said she ain't never brung nobody to no family gathering in her life. They was the firstins. Monique had been a-singing for a spell to make enough money to finish her schooling. She was going to be a CPA with a law degree, and her folks just didn't have the money for her to finish the school. She planned on going back next year, but her pa had a heart spell and couldn't work none, and she was helping out now, so that took a lot of her money. Pierre also said that there was always somebody trying to hustle her and him, and the cousins had to go into town to make sure she wouldn't bother none when she worked. She just didn't cotton to that way of life, but it was an honest way to make a living, singing. There hadn't been no boyfriend since her high school days, and the boy she dated was killed over in Vietnam. Well, it was getting late, and the boys told Pierre they had to get on back to town, and would he mind getting some of the boys to run them on back? Well, the boys and the gals they brung with them from Idaho all told the folks how much fun they had and dearly appreciated their hospitality. The boys was to leave New Orleans at 9:10 a.m. on the Amtrak and was up early to pack and return the car and to be at the train station a little early to make sure they didn't miss the train. The boys all said their goodbyes to the gals from Idaho the previous night. And all of them said they were glad to make some new friends, that they had the best time of their lives with the boys. And now all them boys was perfect gentlemen too now. It goes without saying. Before leaving that night, all the gals come up to Jesse and told him not to worry none about Monique. It was just a woman's way, and he didn't do nothing wrong. In fact, he done everything just right. Well, Jesse couldn't figure that out. Right before they began to board the train, Monique come a-running up to Jesse. She throwed her arms around Jesse and kissed that boy like she meant it, I'm going to tell you. And Jesse's old eyes rolled back like window shades in his old head, 'cause that gal had done plumb took his breath away. Woo! Monique told Jesse that ain't no man ever took her heart, but he did. She said she wanted to see him again, and if he wanted to, and slipped a note into his pocket. Well, as Jesse boarded the train, Monique called out to Jesse, "Jesse Darrell McBrayer, it was love at first sight, me-a-me-oo." Then she turned and run out of that station. Talking that French Cajun stuff to him, woo! Well, now don't that beat all, exclaimed Walter. Walter and the boys all took their seats in their car, and Walter went on to say he ain't never seen the likes of that. Between Bebe and Denise and Monique, Jesse had him a mite of a cipher to do about the future. Buster told Jesse he had plenty of time and knowed he would sort it all out in due time, and that he had his schooling to finish first and to settle into his career before any decision had to be made. Well, Jesse didn't say much, but the boys could see he was plumb ditherated some with all the carrying on. Jesse said them pheromones of his'n didn't help none, but only got him into trouble, which is true. Well, the boys all had a heart-to-heart talk with Jesse about that. They told him it wasn't pheromones, but it was just plain Jesse himself. Jesse said he didn't want to hurt none of the gals and didn't intend no harm nor heartbreak either to them. Well, Hire told Jesse that all this was part of life and it played out different ways for different folks, but he'd find his way through it. The boys would always be there for him no matter what. Well, Buster told Jesse he ought to be right proud to be honored by the affections of all them gals. Not everybody could just up and find somebody to touch their hearts, you know. The memories would always stand in good stead for all of them the rest of their lives, so it wasn't a bad thing. Well, Buster said you can't know joy without sadness, nor happiness without sorrow. Be glad you're blessed, Cousin Jesse. Jesse said, boys, I'm going to send the money to Monique for her to finish her schooling and to help out her ma and pa. What you thinking? Well, all the boys agreed that ought to be done. Well, all the boys settled in for some thinking and some time to get ready for San Antonio. There's also a lot of pictures took by Walter and Howard. And if you folks ever write me at Buster and the boys at yahoo.com, we'll be glad to send them to you. 9th stop, San Antonio, Texas. Well, getting on back down south in the west. Buster said to Walter that the breeze he was a-feeling reminded him of the wind churn at him and Jesse's folks' place back in Arkansas and Kentucky. That old churn just a-swaying in the wind at the corner of the house making butter. Doggone it, that butter makes me think of butter-basted turkey, and that's Thanksgiving. Well, that's when Buster and Jesse's great aunt would bring out the silver to eat with, and it was the only time other than Christmas that they used the silverware. They was the ones used by Robert E. Lee. All the knives, forks, spoons, and was mother of pearl handles and handcrafted real silver. Dang it, I was hungry enough to eat a horse. You was always hungry, hollered Walter. Jesse and Howard. After getting their room and a car for the next day, the boys headed on off to get Buster something to eat. Now, Walter said he was hungry for Mexican food and he knew just where to go. To Cola's, and off they went. Well, the boys ate their fill and Howard wanted to go see the Alamo and take some pictures. Walter was up for that, and Jesse said he wanted to look around a bit too. Well, Buster said some of them Kentucky long rifles is what helped hold off Santa Anna's army. And them boys was from their neck of the woods, you know. Well, picture taking was in tall order for Walter and Howard, and they had a lot of them. The boys spent the rest of their time at Six Flags and down on the Riverwalk. They had a real good time of it and was ready to move on. Well, after checking out of the hotel and turning in their car, the boys had a quick bite to eat, boarded the train for their next stop, L.A. Buster was all the time reading a book and napping, as Jesse reading, that is. Walter and Howard talked to Jesse when he got tired of reading, and they made up some plans, also did some speculating about the future when they got back. They all agreed changes was a-coming, and they all had some right big decisions to cipher on. But there was still some time to go before they stepped up to the plate and did what Davy Crockett said to do: be sure you're right and then go ahead. Well, the three of them all had the same concern about Buster. He just didn't know what direction to go in, excepting where the wind blowed him. They decided to speak to Mr. Holmes about all that, seeing as how Buster's Grandpa Gus was set in his ways and his grandma didn't allow much to be supported Buster but like his mama did. Buster and his mama was right close, and he just couldn't live with her because she remarried and her husband just couldn't handle Buster being there. So pretty near all of Buster's life he lived with his grandma and Grandpa Gus. Time would tell, they said, and they would be there to pick up the pieces if need be, even though they'd be big pieces. 10th stop, Los Angeles, California. Hollywood and movie stars. Well, Nancy come to pick 'em up for a night on the town and to show 'em around the movie studios and back lots. Well, Nancy told the boys she was doing right well and that she would forever appreciate them helping her out. They done made her a millionaire. Now, Nancy done all right at working and all, but Mother Nature's gift of youth commissions put her over the top. She done went on back home and bought herself a spread and outfitted the place real good. She took the boys' advice and made everything as self-sufficient and natural and what they call organic as she could for that day and age. Nancy ain't never married up, and the boys said they hoped she'd find the right hairy-legged old boy soon. Nancy told them there just weren't none to be had in these here parts, though. First place Nancy took them to was the Hollywood sign. Of course, you just knowed every mud hole and crack was going to have his picture took by Hired Walter, so time had to be allowed for that. Well, Nancy called up Asa Wayne and told her the boys was in town, and she went to Howland and told them to come on over, which they did. When the boys and Nancy got there, she said there happened to be a party that night, and she sure wanted them to come. Well, Nancy said she'd make sure they was there, and Asa said they would have a good time, but not to be surprised if some of the movie stars wasn't what they seemed to be on the silver screen. The boys allowed they could handle that. If them folks got to be too uppity or too big for their britches, they knowed how to break 'em down like a cheap shotgun. Well, after supper, Nancy took the boys to her friend Mary Steenburgen's house, and Joy Lauren Adams was there too. Of course, they all knowed them gals and was glad to see 'em. Mr. Factor was in town for a meeting and was there and greeted 'em at the door with Asa. The boys was introduced to lots of folks in the movie business, and Buster's heartthrob, Terry Moore, was there too. Asa asked for everybody's attention and had all the boys and Nancy and Mr. Factor stand up in front of them all with her. Asa told everybody that Mother Nature's gift of youth was invented and developed by the boys, and that's how Nancy and Mr. Factor come to be in business with it. Well, they just couldn't believe it. All them movie stars, men and women, crowded round the boys and began to ask questions, and it weren't long till the gossip columnist had a hopper, started interviewing the boys, Nancy and Mr. Factor. Also, the gossip columnist got her interviews with Mary Steenburgen, Joey Lauren Adams, and Asa Wayne because of them being friends. Well, all manner of folks was asking the boys over at supper and out to have a drink and to speak at meetings and whatnot. The boys had to decline and left all that kind of stuff to Mr. Factor. Heck, fire, they was even offering to put the boys in a picture show or two, westerns mostly. Well, about that time, Buster's absolute favorite singer, Elvis Presley, come in and began to singing. He told Buster that cream worked real good and he was glad it was a southern boy that made it. Well, Buster told him that Jesse done come up with something for the hands. The new cream kept the hands soft as kid gloves but tougher than a boot, and it ought to work real good for guitar picking and karate as well. Well, Buster asked Elvis if he knowed of Leonard Banks, and he said he heard of him, right good fighter. Well, Buster told him the story real quick like, and nobody knowed of the cream, and he would send him a case of it if he wanted something. He said he sure enough did. Just name his and price. Buster told Elvis his and money weren't no good with him. It was a gift from the boys. Now Walter and Howard was all tangled up with them movie stars too, and you just couldn't get on into them with a jackhammer. They was thick as flies on a hog's back, but them two was having a time being the center of attention. Gary Cooper was a nice feller and one of Buster's favorites too, as well as Rita Hayworth. That gal was a pistol. Guess what? Jesse Gunn got hemmed up with Mae West and Elizabeth Taylor. Both of them are wanting him to come up and see them sometime. Well, finally things got calmed down a bit, and Asa asked if the boy wanted to say a few words. Walter piped up and said Jesse done got the idea to make up a new kind of perfume. Well, when he did, Nancy and Mr. Factor would be hating it for him, and Walter guaranteed there wasn't going to be nothing like it ever seen before. Well, that sure created a stir, I tell you. Howard told the folks they would be the first to know right here, and everybody at the party would get some for being so nice to them. Well, Mary and Joey told the boys after the folks left that they sure enough was a hit with the crowd. That's the in crowd, and sure brought their stock up considerable in this town with their being friends and all. Well, Howard told them they was glad they could help, and if it ain't anything else, to give them a holler. Well, Asa said she was approached by several business fellers to get her to get them in on the inside track with the boys' business. She told them that they wasn't like that and would just stay where they was with Mr. Factor and Nancy. Well, the next day the boys hit the high society pages in the papers. They was a hobnobbing with the stars. They wouldn't know how to do anything else, I guess, because they just natural like. That wasn't how it was, but you just got to sell papers, I guess, and slant things the way you want them to be. Seems like fellers can't even come to visit their friends without a lot of hullabaloo nowadays. All the boys had a real good time of visiting and going to Disneyland and a tour in the town and seeing the sights. That Queen Mary was one heck of a big boat too, I tell you. The boys all said their goodbyes that night, and the next morning Nancy and Mr. Factor took them on back to the train station. Mr. Factor said to call him when Jesse got ready to release his new perfume, and he would get right on it and get it to market. He said there wasn't going to be no problem at all with advance sales, and if Jesse and the boys needed some advance money, to just call him. Well, Jesse told Mr. Factor they didn't, but would he do him a favor and send some money to Monique? Enough to finish her schooling and help out her folks. What ain't been said is that every one of the boys was already multimillionaires. Billionaires. They just didn't flaunt it none, and in fact, said the money didn't mean nothing. And paid the money, no never mind, unless to help other folks, because their families was set. Well, Mr. Factor wired Monique $750,000 and didn't let on it come from Jesse and the boys. He'd come up with some kind of story, he said. Whilst they was awaiting for the train, Jesse also told his and Ma to send the hand cream to Elvis at the address he give Buster. Ms. McBrayer told Jesse it would be done today. Well, Jesse and Buster and Howard made up round about 50 jars of the stuff one Saturday whilst Walter was helping his and Pa on the farm. Well, Jesse told his and Ma to send a dozen of them to Elvis when he let her know. Well, Howard told all the boys he picked up some postcards and thank you cards, and they all needed to sign them and send them to the folks that had been so nice and hospitable to them. Their folks dearly loved mail, so he got enough postcards for all their families and friends. Get to signing, he said. Well, folks, part 3 coming up next. Hope you're enjoying the parts.